Canadian Armed Forces serves proudly and professionally every single day in the defense of Canada and its national interests. We defend Canadians against complex threats around the world, and we execute our operations abroad and at home defending Canadians and Canadian interests. We do this with honor, with integrity and courage, values that Canadians expect of their armed forces. However, the idea that any military member should, in addition to the challenges that come with operations, have to defend themselves against the words or the actions of another Canadian Armed Forces member is completely unacceptable. Sexual misconduct runs completely counter to our military ethos and the national values that Canadian Armed Forces exists to uphold and to defend. Au mois d'avril dernier, j'ai demandé à l'honorable Mme Deschamps, ex-juge de la Cour suprême du Canada, de mener une révision sur la question de l'inconduite sexuelle dans les forces armées canadiennes. Son rapport, qui est maintenant rendu public, a été inestimable pour nous aider à comprendre plus clairement le problème et ce que nous devons faire en tant qu'institution. Et de plus, comment appliquer les mesures nécessaires qui s'imposent pour y remédier. I'd like to personally thank Mme Deschamps for her considered perspective on the dimensions of this complex problem and for her vision on how our institution can affect change going forward. As to the findings of the report, I'll be very clear. They're disturbing. Disturbing to me, disturbing to the leaders within the Canadian Armed Forces, and I believe they'll be disturbing for the great majority of our members in uniform. The most concerning of these findings is the existence of an underlying sexualized culture that, if unchecked, is conducive to sexual misconduct. Now, we're not the only organization dealing with this problem, but for an institution such as ours, one built on camaraderie and trust, this underlying sexualized behavior is corrosive. We demand and we expect a higher standard of conduct from ourselves as members of the Canadian Armed Forces. This is a problem we have to act decisively to address. Frankly, our operational effectiveness depends on the unwavering trust and cohesion amongst all of our members, regardless of their gender or their background. J'ai accepté les 10 recommandations du rapport de Mme Deschamps, soit sans condition ou soit en principe. Concernant celles que j'ai acceptées en principe, nous prendrons maintenant le temps d'approfondir les recherches et de les analyser afin de trouver le moyen le plus efficace de les appliquer. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a complex problem within a complex institution, an institution whose members are drawn from Canadian society at large. The situation, therefore, will require a sustained effort from across the Canadian Armed Forces for an extended period of time. We're not talking about days and weeks, but about months and years. Now, while recent surveys and retention data may have suggested that we've made much improvement from past years, the rate of that improvement just has not been acceptable. We did not ask Mme Deschamps to look back and to assess how much improvement we've made over recent decades. We asked her to look at us in the here and now and to look forward to where we could and should be. As a result, Mme Deschamps' findings and recommendations have now provided us the basis upon which we'll accelerate our rate of improvement. I therefore instructed the leader of the Strategic Response Team, led carefully and aggressively by Major General Christine Whitecross, to develop the measures and actions required to address this problem, measures that will be sustained over time. Major General Whitecross will outline this action plan in a couple of moments, but action is the operative word here. The Canadian Armed Forces must now take strong steps forward and initiate progressive change. For those in uniform, let me make clear to you that the problem lies not only with those who behave poorly or maliciously. The responsibility also rests with those who idly stand by and permit inappropriate behavior to persist, from jokes to harassment to assaults. An organization's culture drives the behavior of its members. Just as inappropriate sexual behavior has no place in today's Canadian Armed Forces, Neither does ignorance nor apathy. As I've stated, this is a serious problem that must be addressed, and much remains to be done, but we're not starting from zero. Some of our policies and procedures are working effectively, and many of our people are very much doing the right things. Et dans les forces armées canadiennes, il n'y a pas de place pour les personnes qui n'ont pas la volonté de créer un milieu de travail respectueux pour tous et qui ne le favorise pas. If there's any doubt that the Canadian Armed Forces is taking this problem seriously, one only needs to look at the senior military command team members in the room here this afternoon to recognize that our leadership is fully engaged and committed to addressing it. As Canadian Armed Forces members, exemplary conduct is part of our obligation to serve. We cannot accept anything less. I will not accept anything less. They will not accept anything less. I'll now ask the Canadian Forces Chief Warrant Officer Kevin West to provide his perspective before asking Mme Deschamps to speak. Chief West.
Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Les gens des Forces armées canadiennes servent leur pays avec fierté et honneur à tous les jours. The subject of inappropriate sexual behavior is not an easy one to talk about or to confront. But absolutely, we cannot afford to tuck it away and hope it will disappear. If this is not addressed, this will remain an issue, particularly for those who have been affected by this type of behavior. We are more than just an organization. Regardless of gender, ethnicity, occupation, or service, we are one family, the Canadian Armed Forces. Aucun de nos membres ne devrait avoir à s'inquiéter en aucun temps d'avoir à se défendre contre un de ses confrères d'armes. Each member has earned the right and deserves the right to be treated with respect and dignity. These values cannot change when it comes to the treatment of one another. The Chief of Defence Staff and I have spoken about this across our bases and wings across this country. We need everybody to be talking about this if we're going to improve. En tant que membre des Forces armées canadiennes, nous combattons en mer, au sol et dans les airs, avec fierté et professionnalisme, en maintenant les valeurs canadiennes avec honneur et distinction. Mme Deschamps' report speaks specifically to the non-commissioned member corps. First, it is evident the operational success of the Canadian Armed Forces are in large part due to the quality of our non-commissioned members, who, in many cases, conduct the basic and initial training of our officers and non-commissioned members alike. That said, it is critical that at the start, the principles of mutual respect and dignity are built into the fabric of our initial training. The report indicates that this requires improvement. L'inconduite d'ordre sexuel est un problème collectif sur lequel nous devons nous pencher ensemble. Nous aborderons ce problème avec un bon sens d'équité en veillant que les victimes reçoivent le meilleur soutien possible. On that note, I want to take the opportunity once again to remind any victims of inappropriate sexual behavior, whether on duty or off duty, that you have a range of options available to you. Ideally, you should feel comfortable going to your chain of command. Although, you do have other options. You can seek assistance from the military or civilian police, your local health clinics, your base chaplains, the Canadian Armed Forces Member Assistance Program, or the support of those who you feel most comfortable with, including your shipmates, battle buddies, and wingmen. It takes time to change a culture, but we must and will take ownership of this problem. We must begin with behavioral change, which will lead to the change of the culture necessary to improve our Canadian Armed Forces. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a no-fail mission. We all have to look at this problem with an open mind and through the lenses of our military values and ethos, the very fundamentals of who we are and what we stand for as members of the Canadian Armed Forces. Et par-dessus tout, chaque membre des Forces armées canadiennes doit s'investir à cette mission et prendre part à la recherche et à la mise en œuvre des solutions. I'm committed to leading this change as part of the command team with General Lawson and all other senior leaders. It is my duty, it is the duty of every member of the Canadian Armed Forces to support this action plan that will be presented to you shortly. Merci.
Thank you, Chief. Mme Deschamps, vous avez la parole.
Alors, ce que vous trouvez dans mon rapport est une perspective tout à fait externe de l'organisation. Le rapport est le fruit de nombreuses rencontres, d'une étude minutieuse des politiques de l'armée, en fait des politiques des forces armées en matière de harcèlement sexuel et d'agression sexuelle, et d'un examen de ce que sont présentement les meilleures pratiques. Je ne commenterai pas mon rapport, mais je veux souligner 3 points fondamentaux qui peuvent se résumer en 3 mots. Victime, confiance et momentum. Les victimes. Chacune des 10 recommandations dans mon rapport est de nature à améliorer le sort des membres des forces armées. L'impact doit se faire sentir à tous les niveaux, non seulement dans le milieu de vie quotidien, mais aussi dans le soutien aux victimes et dans la prévention d'incidents futurs. Soutenir les victimes veut dire que les forces armées doivent donner priorité au soutien des victimes, aux besoins des victimes. En parlant de prévention, je veux bien entendu parler du fait que les forces armées doivent enseigner aux membres ce qu'est un comportement professionnel, mais aussi cela veut dire dissuader. Dissuader les contrevenants éventuels et imposer des sanctions de façon prompte et des sanctions qui sont de nature à faire comprendre à tous que les compromis ne seront pas acceptés. L'importance accordée aux victimes ne peut pas être sous-estimée. C'est par elles que les forces armées pourront juger du changement de culture. Ce sont ces hommes et ces femmes qui permettront de vérifier le niveau du respect pour la dignité des personnes et le professionnalisme de nos forces armées. The second point is a guiding principle underlying my recommendations. It is the need to rebuild the trust and confidence of the Canadian Armed Forces members in their organization. This will require short, medium, and long-term measures to bring about real change in the organizational culture of the forces. And, as was mentioned, such change will take time. The first step, however, is for the Canadian Forces leadership to demonstrate to members that they acknowledge that the problem of sexual harassment and sexual assault in the armed forces is real, and that the forces will take the necessary steps to tackle the issue, including by adopting measures that are recognized as international best practices. One of these practices on which I relied strongly is the creation of an independent organization, of an independent center, where victims can seek support and advice. It is critical that such a center be truly independent of the armed forces in order to reassure victims that by reporting an incident of sexual harassment or sexual assault, they will be able to access support without triggering negative consequences for their career or in their personal lives. This is a model that the American forces adopted 10 years ago, that the Australian Defence Forces adopted in 2012, and this is also the model that the French forces implemented last summer in 2014. Based on my consultations with members of the Canadian Forces, both victims of harassment and assault and the professionals who work with victims, I found that the creation of an independent center to assist and support victims of sexual assault and sexual harassment is an essential step in rebuilding the confidence of members in their organization. The third point, momentum. During the visits I made to bases across the country, I received a very favorable welcome from many leaders. This indicates to me that there are, in the Canadian Forces, a number of persons who are open to and indeed welcome a change in the organizational culture and are ready to participate in that change to prevent further incidents of sexual harassment and assault. In addition, since my report was filed, I've had the opportunity to meet with General White Cross and members of her team, some are in the room, and I have felt that there is a real willingness to implement the necessary changes. The momentum is there. It is time to take action. Thank you.
Merci, Madame. At this point, I'd like to ask General Whitecross to provide some detail on the action plan. Christine.
Thanks, sir. Je voudrais d'abord remercier Mme Deschamps pour ses efforts liés à la préparation de son rapport. Comme l'a mentionné le General Lawson, je dirige actuellement une équipe dévouée d'hommes et de femmes, militaires et civils, dont l'objectif vise à passer en revue le rapport de Mme Deschamps et à évaluer ses recommandations afin d'élaborer un plan d'action exhaustif et efficace pour régler le problème. Inappropriate sexual behavior is a complex problem, and quick band-aid fixes are unlikely to solve its many dimensions. We need well-considered, innovative change to arrive at a long-term and sustainable solution. Our action plan is a key step in this process. It allows the Canadian Armed Forces to focus a decisive response while allowing us to understand and solve the more complex aspects of the problem and develop more comprehensive solutions. Notre plan d'action compte 4 lignes d'efforts importantes. Premièrement, une meilleure compréhension du problème. 2. Une intervention plus efficace dans le cadre d'incidents de conduite sexuelle inappropriée. 3. Un plus grand soutien aux victimes. Et 4. La prévention. You have heard from General Lawson and Chief Warrant Officer West that this review must involve engagement from every command level, from the grassroots up. If our own members don't believe in the change and actively engage in it, it will not take hold. The action plan will help us deliver more consistent, effective, and up-to-date policies, processes, communication, education and training, victim support, and prevention, and leadership will be vital to ensuring their successes come once they are in place. Now, for more detail on the action plan, let me outline our 10 action items which align with the report's 10 recommendations. In response to Recommendation 1, the Chief of Defense Staff has just acknowledged inappropriate sexual behavior is a serious problem, and the Canadian Armed Forces leadership is fully committed to eliminating it to the extent possible. 2. The Strategic Response Team has been stood up and has started detailed planning in terms of addressing the problem of underlying sexualized culture. Pour la recommandation 3, l'équipe d'intervention stratégique examinera quelle structure est nécessaire pour une capacité centralisée. Nous avons déjà commencé à rencontrer des organisations nationales et internationales qui s'apparentent aux forces armées canadiennes et qui ont mis en œuvre des structures similaires. Les 2 exemples les plus manifestes sont ceux des États-Unis et de l'Australie, mais ce ne sont pas les seules organisations. Number 4. In response to Mme Deschamps' finding that many incidents go unreported, we will modernize the reporting process and will look at options providing victims with the possibility of receiving support without triggering a formal complaint process. 5, the strategic response team has already commenced a comprehensive review of all language and definitions associated with inappropriate sexual behavior in the Canadian Armed Forces, in order to modernize the language and guarantee consistent understanding of terminology, including consent. Most importantly, we must ensure that all our men and women clearly understand related rules, regulations, and expectations. In response to recommendation 6, the team will conduct a review of all the relevant policies associated with inappropriate sexual behavior, with the objective of integrating them much more coherently. One of the enabling tools will be a simple, comprehensive guide. L'équipe doit jouer un rôle actif dans le cadre d'un récent projet de ministère au sujet de la possibilité de rassembler le processus lié aux plaintes de harcèlement, de modes alternatifs de règlement des conflits et le système de règlement des grillades. 8. The strategic response team will examine options of giving victims greater influence over how their complaints are handled, and as a matter of priority, develop options to better inform victims of the complaint processes that are currently in place. 9. The strategic response team will examine the delivery of support to members who come forward with an allegation of inappropriate sexual behavior. We will leverage the experiences of domestic and international organizations that have addressed similar problems. Finalement, pour la recommandation 10, l'équipe doit mettre l'accent sur la formation et l'éducation. L'objectif final est la mise en œuvre d'un programme de formation et d'éducation moderne et adapté dans les plus brefs délais. Once again, I remind everyone that this is the starting point of the action plan, which will evolve in the coming weeks and months. Implementing these 10 action items in future activities will allow us to develop a sustainable approach and to address inappropriate sexual behavior in the Canadian Armed Forces. So why will this plan work? Well, implementation is vital, but it must be monitored. Therefore, another key element of the action plan is the integration of performance measurement into each change initiative. Our focus will not simply be on the action plan, but on the outcomes that the plan will generate. As part of our measurement commitment, we will be providing quarterly updates on what we've accomplished and what our next steps will be to the chain of command, to the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces, and to external stakeholders, including media. As Chief Warrant Officer West said, this is a no-fail mission for the Canadian Armed Forces. Those we help through our domestic and international operations depend on it. The public's unfailing trust in our men and women in uniform depend on it. And every young woman and young man who dreams of being a part of the Canadian Armed Forces depends on it. We will not let any of them down. Nous ne devons pas les laisser tomber. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. You've heard from us. We'll be delighted to take your questions, Captain.